I should put a different background on. There's an ISSA meeting tonight, Brian, so I wanted to be here
Oh,
for the
nice.
meeting.
Totally
So,
fair.
yes, definitely. And you have I believe you have the screen share. We're just a few minutes early. We've
Yeah,
publicized this, and with our time zones, people will, that's why we like to record.
sure. No worries at all.
Yeah, Eduardo, I'm glad you made it. Jan, you and I have to schedule time to talk.
Okay. Am I in trouble?
No,
Oh, okay.
hardly. You volunteered to help me with some outreach. I'm going to keep you busy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Looking forward to that.
Okay, so we do really have to wait 3 more minutes.
Yeah, no worries. I literally logged on to validate that the technology was working and my headset was connected and all the usual tech stuff that is bound to go wrong if you don't test it early.
You know, and it's funny. I was talking with, I'm trying to remember who it was. I was in a meeting with somebody, and it was the president of our cybersecurity club, who works at Boeing.
Mhm.
And does all of these techie things. And he was saying exactly the same thing. And he says, it never fails. Even the greatest technologist in the world can have the equipment get their wires crossed.
I spoke 2 years ago at Secure World, and I was paranoid because this is the first time I spoke at Secure World. So I was like, okay, big audience, big name. I don't want to let these people down. So I literally tested my computer. I tested all the dongles, all the power equipment. I did everything. I went to the room that I was going to be speaking in, was busy at the time. So I went to a separate room, tested the whole setup. Everything worked. Got there 15 minutes early, got into the room, got everything set up. Projector doesn't work. And I'm trying everything and I've got a tech guy in there, and then I've got other people that are starting to come into the room. And ultimately what happened is between the last session and my session, the projector itself actually just failed.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I literally was like, I'll just start because I have my computer, I can speak, and we'll speak to the big blue screen until the project next. So they went next door, grabbed a new projector and swapped out. So about halfway in the audience got to see the slides. So it was kind of humorous, but stressful at the time.
You felt like a FedEx commercial, didn't you?
I did. Well, actually, the thing that came to mind was I know what I'm going to talk about. I've rehearsed this. It's really, the slides are not for me. So cool, I can keep going. So let's just get going, right? Like the show must go on kind of mentality. But yes, absolutely. I was like, this is absolutely one of those moments where you just kind of don't know what's happening until it happens, and you just have to adapt.
You know, and Brian, one of the things, and I think you're already covering it, is that you've rehearsed your presentation, that everything is ready to go, and you have to be able to turn on a dime. Well, the only way you're able to do that is to practice.
Yes.
And to present a lot. And the part that concerns me in today's environment, because we are a virtual university, and I even saw this happening when I was at Highline and UW. People were afraid to get up and present.
Yeah. Well, and for me personally, my strategy is if I try to memorize it, I will fail. But if I know the topic and I know directionally where I need to go, a little stutter here or a stumble there won't throw me off because I can just steer back to the path I need to be on, right? But if I try to memorize a script, for me personally, that is a bad thing, because then if I stumble on a word, I get stuck on I have to go back and get the word, or I have to say the sentence right. And that's not at all right? Nobody else knows what I'm going to say except me. So I don't have to do that, right? So if I overplan, but I do have to practice and I do have to get the timing down and those sorts of things, that's just necessary part of it, right? Because I did twice the same topic, but once was a 30-minute slot and once was a 60-minute slot. I did the 30-minute first. So when I got to the front part of the 60-minute slot a few weeks later, I was speaking really fast because I was trying to cover everything quickly. And then I found out, I'm like, oh, wait, I can slow down. I have time here. So, even with practice, sometimes you have to catch yourself.
And it makes a difference. So, okay, so I think it is now 4:31, And I have, okay, I didn't know if Kina was going to just welcome everyone and I was going to introduce you, although we've had this conversation. And by the way, if everyone would, at least at the beginning, turn your cameras on, let Brian see that we're real people and not bots. You can do it, folks. I'm not talking to a bunch of Gen Zs.
Morgan, I want to say hello. Brian, thank you so much. Thank you for having here. Welcome. I'm Sam. I'm Dean of School of Technology Computing. I welcome you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice to meet you.
Okay, and Kina, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Oh, so I can start now, right?
Okay, well,
hi.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi Brian and hi everyone. Welcome to our HTC Investor Talk today. And we are so happy to welcome Brian will be our speaker. So okay. Now, Morgan, you can say something?
I get to introduce Brian. Brian, you and I have known each other for about a decade or more.
Yes, probably about 12 to 15 years.
Yes, and you were doing great things then. You were at Microsoft at that point.
I believe, yes.
If I remember correctly. And Brian is one of those people who got into security before it was a thing. I mean, and when you look at his LinkedIn, he started out in chemistry, which I love. You are also a veteran of the U.S. Army. And then you have just come to Washington and really grown roots. The thing that I find impressive about you is your willingness to talk to groups, the approach that you take. It's down to earth and it's grounded. So we had a conversation at Salesforce, his recent change from Microsoft to Salesforce, and it was about AI, and you opened up avenues and areas so that I wanted you to just take it from here, because everybody's talking about AI and you're actually questioning and using.
I am.
So
I do a lot of questioning, if you get to know me.
Which is a good thing. So with that, I'm going to turn this presentation over to you and you can share the screen as you like.
Fantastic. Let me do this. Yes, a second. It's now telling me I have to go to my security and privacy settings to let Teams do its job. So I will do that. Apologize. This is that tech.
This is that tech. While it's getting ready, Ian Hutchison, who is our president of the Cybersecurity Club, made it. And I see Eduardo, who's been showing up, and a number of people. And the other thing is that we do record this because we have people from different time zones. Jeff, we're going to talk internship this week.
And I apologize, but it does tell me that I have to restart Teams to do this. So I will disappear for just a moment and I will be right back. Of course, this is the part that I couldn't test earlier. So I apologize to everyone. I will be right back.
No problem. Okay. I hope everyone realizes Brian is one of those very seasoned professionals who I'm hoping to have join our board of advisors and to start directing our programs. He works now for Salesforce. Has everybody here looked up that little organization called Salesforce? Brian has a fast computer. Mine would still be spinning. And Brian, I also told everyone to look up Salesforce because you are a global organization. And you're muted. So just to let you know that, it puts you in safe mode.
Oh, it did. It put me in safe mode, so it couldn't hear the commentary on having to reboot in the middle of having a conversation.
Okay.
So I am pulling up the deck as we speak. I apologize for the delay. And let me go into sharing mode. And I do not know if there is a policy on my, because it says I am set to share. Oh, man. I apologize. This is really embarrassing. A tech guy. This
if
is that
this
tech
is-
guy that doesn't know how to work tech conversations.
No, that's not it. Now, Kina, you have the slides on your computer, correct?
I need to download that one.
You want
So
to
that is the
download them
email.
too, because if what we could do, Brian, is if your computer, and that's the
Yeah.
problem with very secure computers, and they're always changing things, is you sent the slides to Kina, and Kina could share her screen as soon as she downloads them, and then you can she can share her screen, and then you can direct her to next slide.
Sure. No, that would be totally fine.
Okay. So Kina, do you want to do that while you're?
Let's do it. Let me check it. Because for this one, I set up that everyone can share the screen already.
Right, but the problem is not
his
from
computer.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not from our side right now.
Okay,
It's his probably his very secure computer that filters everything.
The company does not want me sharing outside is probably the problem.
Yeah. So Kina, could you please share your screen, and then
because I cannot check that. Okay, I cannot check that in the email. Like what can you send me to me the slide again?
Okay, I'm looking and I'm working off of my phone. So hold on just a second.
Can you share to me your?
Okay, here, I'm going to forward it. I see what happened. He didn't forward it to you. Hold on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, hold on. I'm going to get out so I can. Okay.
Well, while we are solving my own technical difficulties, I apologize. Thank you for the assistance. What I will do is I will get briefly started with just a few comments. What I was going to talk about and what we're talking about today is a presentation I've done a little bit on generative AI and how to proceed using it. What I've nicknamed it as how to proceed with caution, because it is coming. It is one of those things that is very hyped. You hear a lot about it. Many times you hear things in the industry that get hyped that end up being not as big as they are hyped. I think AI personally is going to be as big as it is hyped, although I don't think it is where the hype is. And so I'll talk about that a little bit as we get into the presentation. But it's out there, and specifically the LLM models that are in use and the evolution of the LLM models that has really transformed into something that is allowing AI to be much more available to everybody, right? It's not a specialized technology anymore to use. It is to develop, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So I'll get into that a little bit. But first, what I'm going to talk a little bit about is, what is it? For those that aren't familiar, and people hear the terminology, but what is it really, right? AI is really just a specialized type of artificial intelligence and a machine learning system. In this particular case, LLMs are typically what people will be referring to when they refer to AI in the current environment. But AI actually is a very broad set of things, and LLMs are a specialty version of a generative AI model. And what a large language model essentially is, it's simplistically put, it is a next word prediction engine or a next token prediction engine. It breaks what you feed it up into tokens, and then it uses statistical models to determine what is the next most likely thing that's going to appear in that model. And if you could jump to slide 5 when you have a moment, thank you. Perfect. And so what it really does is it breaks down what you feed it into tokens, then uses other examples of those tokens and makes an attempt to predict what is the next token in the sequence. So for words, it tries to create sentences. So AI can make things like, say this the way Shakespeare would say it. Why can it do that? It can do that because it has studied all the works of Shakespeare, and it knows statistically how Shakespeare would have said something, and it's usually pretty good at that, right? So it's basically a language-centric model. The reason I kind of substituted tokens for words is, using other technologies, we've found that we can also treat different things as language. So as an example, you can see it work on images. Those work that they do with images is fundamentally using the same technology. It's just treating the pixels like the tokens. So that's essentially what we're working with when we talk about LLMs and so forth. The last point I want to make here is, and if you're keeping up on the sort of most recent events that seem to be coming up in the world of the AI systems, You might hear some of the big players talking about peak data, right? What is peak data? Peak data really is, fundamentally speaking, large language models are consuming every bit of data they can get their hands on. At some point, these models are getting so big that they have actually consumed all of the publicly available information into their model that they can. They have no more data left to consume, so they can no longer train the model. So you're starting to hear discussions about using synthetic data sets, or actually shifting into small language models, where they're actually doing small, very specialty models to supplement the large language models and to sort of hybridize between those. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is a very oversimplified picture that I got from, excuse me, that I got from the Ars Technica article that is linked in the bottom here. But what it essentially shows is what happens, right? And so I'm going to be perfectly honest, because generative AI is based on neural network technology, we don't actually know in detail, deterministically, what AI does. Why is that true? Because it changes as it does it. And because of that, there is no deterministic way to say, I know exactly what it's going to do and the output that it's going to produce. And that is actually a good thing from an AI perspective, but it does have the side effect of hallucinations, which we'll get into in a little bit. But essentially, this is what I was saying. Queries are broken into words or tokens. They're compared to vectors. And a vector is a string of related information. So as an example, if I said, I want to know something about Los Angeles, one of the vectors might be other cities in California, right? And those would be things that be related that might be part of future queries or part of future options. So using that, and there are, I believe, 10 to the 28th or 10 to the 32nd vectors in many of the current models. So there's a lot of information being shared and being considered in this, which is why they're so compute heavy. But from here, it basically does a series of comparisons, filterings, and predictions repeatedly until it statistically has an answer to what is the next token. And then it repeats that over and over and over again until it feels like it has completed its job. That is essentially what it is doing under the hood. It is, of course, vastly more complex than I did. I oversimplified that. But that is what an LLM AI model is doing as it's doing this work. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So what are the risks associated? Can we go to the next slide, please? So there's a series of things. Yes, that one, please. There's a series of things that we are looking at as risks associated with generative AI. And to be clear, generative AI in many instances is being instantiated in a very similar way to what a SaaS application would be instantiated as. So all of the things that you would do for normal cybersecurity or normal SaaS applications will still apply, but there are a few things that actually apply uniquely to Gen AI. So I'm trying to focus mostly on the unique things here. I'm not focusing in on the fundamentals like have good passwords and make sure that your firewalls and so forth. Those are things that I assume that we'll do as part of just general SaaS. The first part of it comes out is hallucinations. And what hallucinations are is essentially an answer that is incorrect coming out of the AI. Now, the problem is AI is going to treat that incorrect answer as if it was absolutely correct, because it has statistically said that is true. And the example I like to use here is, if you are talking to an AI model and you ask it, what is 1 + 1? It can answer 3. Could be the next answer. Why? Because people, when discussing synergy, will talk like 1 + 1 = 3 is sort of symbolically a representation of synergy. That is a legitimate sentence that has appeared in the English language, and therefore it can appear in the LLM model. It's mathematically obviously not true, but it can be true in certain contexts. And so to the model, it's true, even though your answer, you might have been just trying to get a simple math problem out of it, which is also one of the reasons why I recommend don't do LLMs for simple math problems. It's not a very good mechanism for that. There's a lot of discussion around the privacy aspects of LLMs. They're going out and they're slurping up a bunch of data off the internet. Does this breach privacy? Does this have implications? I'm going to say yes, it does. However, I cannot comment on the legality and regulatory nature of it, because most of those cases are still pending in courts. So does the opportunity exist for LLMs to consume data that should otherwise be private? Yes. Should systems have ways to filter, tokenize, or otherwise anonymize that data if need be? Yes, there are some side effects of that. If you tokenize data after the model's consumed it, you might break the model, or you might cause a high increased variance in the hallucinations. And when you do that, that actually causes your model's reliability to go down. Copyright is another one. They talk a lot, and there's a lot of discussion on the internet about AI violating copyrights. I have a person that I work with on a regular basis who is a cybersecurity lawyer. He has very strong opinions on this. Mine are less strong, but I will share some of his nonetheless. You can't really do a copyright violation with LLM directly. What I mean by that is you can steal somebody's material, but when you bring it into the model, it breaks it into tokens and doesn't exist as the original piece that was brought into the engine. It's now tokenized. It does not exist in that way. You could then recreate that by asking and prompting the right way, in which case you may actually then be back into the violation category, which is why I said I'm a little less strong than he is. But you cannot, and this is also going through the course now, you cannot copyright works from AI because part of the copyright law insists that there is actual human creativity involved to generate a copyright. And as of now, AI does not have standing in court, is not considered anything that's close to a person. So because of that, it cannot make copyrighted works. There are arguments going on, and they're passing through the courts now, that my prompting was the creativity and the prompt creation was the creativity that generated, therefore it is still copyrightable. Those are going through court. So those are things you have to worry about that are more on the legal side. Let's look a little bit in more some of the other areas. Cybersecurity I did touch on, but one of the areas that's really interesting about LLMs and models is prompt injection and using prompts to manipulate the data. Because if the engine is learning from the prompts and responding and adapting as the prompts, you can use the prompts to actually poison the data model, and you can poison the engine and make it come up with results that are not supposed to happen. It's not common, but it can happen. And so there's things that you need to consider as part of this. In addition to that, you really have a high reliance on extremely large data sets. Extremely large data sets come with an inherent set of biases. You need to be careful that the data that you're using can be validated to not contain biases. There are several cases where insurance companies or other people have used AI to do large medical databases, and they've pulled in information. And what they found is it pulled cases in, thought them to be true, that had then later been proven untrue, but were not removed from the data set. So the LLM was responding to them as if they were valid data sets, and it was coming up with biased data models. Model training is very expensive. In addition to that, it is extremely GPU intensive. And so cost is very much something that can be hard to get to. In addition to that, now this was written a while back, this is changing as we speak, but the talent to build, sustain, and create these AI models is also still very rare and still very expensive. So the cost of entry for AI can be prohibitive for some folks and for smaller companies. And last but not least, how do you train a model to forget? And we'll talk a little bit in another slide about sort of GDPR and the people's right to forget. There are privacy laws that allow you to say, I want you to forget everything you know about me. There are some carve-outs for law enforcement and security and other things, but generally speaking, they want to say, delete everything you know about me. Because of the way the AI models work, that is extremely difficult with AI. And if you don't pre-plan for that, it can create problems with your model. And because going back to the cost, if it's extremely expensive to rebuild your model, every time somebody says, forget me, there is an obvious problem there, which is somebody could just come to you every week and say, forget everything you know, and you're rebuilding your model every week. And that can be extremely expensive, almost to the point of being a denial of service or damaging to your company if you're driving that way. And can I go to the next slide, please? Some other risks to consider. Models are opaque. I'm starting at the bottom on this one because that's where the graphic is, but some of the models are opaque. And so we don't know all of the calculations and all of the things that are going into what is in the model, which goes to the next piece, which is explainability. If you are depending on this for business or personal decisions, you should be able to explain how that decision was made. And sometimes AI is very difficult to come up with how did that decision get made and can I do that? And even more so if you have to get legal and you go to court. It would be nearly impossible to go to a judge and say, I did it because the AI said so, and that's all I know. They're not going to buy that. So it is definitely something that you should consider as you go through using of AI. Deepfake audio and video. AI is becoming extremely good at doing this in real time, audio and video. It can do graphics, and it can make it hard. I did not have a chance to add it in here, but for another presentation, I got a personal endorsement from Morgan Freeman and Eric Cartman, simply to show that this is really easy to fake that. You can make this happen. It is going to get harder and harder to detect these things. So there's going to be some variant of an arms race probably in this area where people are using AI to detect AI fakes who are then being faked by AI. I think that's going to go on for some time. This is going to be harder and harder too, because the side effects of this are things like harassment, doxing, and swatting, because now you could produce visual evidence that somebody was at a place that they legitimately were not at, or those sorts of things, and that can become very difficult. AI and cyber attacks, this is happening today. These are real true things. Attacks are now being extremely tailored using AI. I can produce 30 to 50 personalized attacks on an individual or an individual company in days rather than months or years. This is becoming very easy. Adapting phishing campaigns. You can't look for typos anymore because LLMs will pull that out of the system. They're still out there. The bad ones are out there, but the professionals are using AI to make these things look very real, and they're very, very good at it. Another opportunity that people like to talk about, job replacement. Lots of folks talk about now. I know that our CEO, Mark Benioff, has commented on hiring less software engineers, as has the Meta CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. I actually feel like this is a temporary problem, that this will be a job retraining problem, not a job replacement problem, because all of the things that we're doing with AI require new jobs. I think we're actually creating net more jobs, but there's a latency between the replacement and the creation. So we do have to figure out what that's going to do. And we did talk a little bit about this one, but targeted generated disinformation campaigns. It is now extremely easy to create disinformation campaigns that feel very personally tailored and are targeted at people that you want to target. And so that is going to continue to be an area where I think we have a lot of risk with people using AI. And maybe we move to the next slide, please. I touched a little bit about these, so I won't go too far into this, but exclusivity, it's expensive. Therefore, there's a growing have and have not feel about the use of AI, and that there is not a level playing field today. It's extremely expensive. So because of that, there are areas that we need to work on. Regulatory guidance, Europe at one point had come out and said they were going to block all AI. They changed that stance, but that was something that they had brought up, and that wasn't viewed as a good idea by a lot of people, because if you are not working on AI, you're just falling behind. And so they did eventually go down, but that was their initial position. They thought it was too dangerous. Geopolitical use, failure to reach consensus on AI usage may actually make it so that there are disparate rules and ethics frameworks in which people are working, which will just cause difficulties. And last but not least, cyber insurance. Rates could change. AI assessments of your vulnerabilities could happen. There are various ways that they could do that, which would change cyber insurance rates. So all of these areas are sort of nascent and emerging, but they're areas that we need to consider as we talk about AI. So ultimately, if we go to the next slide, what is it that we do about it, right? Well, the good news is OWASP, who we have learned to love and trust through other security work that they do, has come up with the top 10 for large language models. These are the top 10 security problems that they see with the large language models. I talked about some of these, like prompt injection, training data poisoning, sensitive information disclosure. But there are other things, simply like insecure plugin design, right? Do you have standard security problems in a plugin that's using your AI and therefore it's exposing things it shouldn't be? What about supply chain vulnerabilities? Like, where do you get your data from? Where does the model come from? Was it an open source model? Was it a private source model? Did you create the model yourself? Those are all areas where we need to start thinking about how we handle our security of our software and our data to make sure that AI is being used correctly and that it's producing outputs that are both reliable and useful for the function that we wanted them to do. And if we can go to actually 2 slides forward, please. So we're going to start talking a little bit about the security and compliance aspects here. So I touched on this. All SaaS and general security principles should apply. You should be doing your software development lifecycle, threat modeling, code scanning, credentials management, et cetera. Those are going to continue to be true for AI for sure. Data sovereignty and the right to be forgotten. These are sort of more on the privacy data governance side, but there are a lot of existing rules in the privacy space around data sovereignty, meaning I don't want any information about my citizens to leave the boundaries of my country. Those rules will continue to apply for AI, and therefore you have to consider how your data management is happening and where your models are processing and storing that data to make sure that you continue to be compliant with these rules. They pre-exist and they have as yet not had any carve-outs for AI usage, so it is believed that they will continue to be applicable to those spaces, although I have not seen any cases evolve just yet. We touched upon hallucinations. Basically, those are just mistakes that the AI will tell you is a true statement. My war story here is the lawyer that I like to work with. He did asked ChatGPT to give him the history of his own law firm, and it completely fabricated two lawyers with the names of the law firm, and then probably gave a story about how these two lawyers got together and formed this law company. It was completely false based on internet information, but it was not actually true, nor were those people even existent people. So he laughed at it, but that's the kind of thing you can get if you do not prompt correctly or feed the correct data into the models. Toxicity. This is one that has come up several times. If anybody remembers some early AI from Microsoft named Tay, they put it out. It was probably out for 4 to 5 weeks before they had to take it offline because it became a raging Nazi. And that was bad, and they thought that wasn't a good thing. But the reason was they did not put any controls in it, and people thought it was funny to feed bad things to the model and then have the model reflect bad things back. And eventually the model trained itself to be a very nasty thing, so they had to take it offline. So toxicity in the inputs and outputs is something that we need to consider, especially when you are consuming user-generated content or content that comes unfiltered off of the internet. It's a little simpler when you're using internal data to generate the training on the models. We did talk about copyright issues, so I'm going to talk a little bit about ethics. This one's a little difficult, and this is kind of breaks into what I think, in my mind at least, is a little more of a philosophical question, which is how do we train AI to be ethical when we amongst the globe have not agreed on ethical frameworks? But we need that. We really do need people thinking about ethical usage of AI, because there are plenty of ways to use AI poorly and to invade people's privacy and to be very, very bad with AI. So ethics is a topic that I am personally passionate about, and I think is something that needs to be discussed quite a bit in the generative AI space, simply because it needs to be right. We shouldn't get it wrong and then try to put that genie back in the bottle. It just doesn't generally work that way. Next slide, please. We'll go into a little bit of compliance issues. I won't, again, discuss this. These were more for just take home and read. But there is European Union. There is a link there to the Artificial Intelligence Act. There is also an interim measure for the management of generative AI within China. United States did it through executive order under President Biden. And as the new administration comes in, we're not sure what that's going to look like. But these laws will continue to emerge, and public opinion can sway regulations around AI usage, much like it has done in some cases for biometrics. So I do think these are important things to watch as practitioners of AI. I don't necessarily say, gee, become a lawyer, but these are things that we do need to be important watch points for how we keep track of AI. So the next couple slides, if you skip 2 ahead, please. This one is a quote that I really like, which is, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing, right? We can investigate AI all we want in theory, but the actual reality is we need to get into practice and go do it. So as we talk into the next slide, I set this up as easy first steps for business. First things first, define the rules for your company. What are you trying to do with AI, and establish an acceptable use policy? That is exceptionally important. You can wander the desert for years trying to figure out a good way to use AI, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you probably won't find it. So pick the things that you think are going to be useful to you and your business and go do those things. Start small and go to it. Align these to your business objectives, right? I shouldn't be, as Salesforce, running large language models that do processing of astronomy data. Now, it might be fun and useful for me as a hobby, but certainly not something I want my AI for Salesforce to be spending cycles on, because it can be expensive. Also need to ensure that all of your business users are in line with what you're doing here. Your marketing team is already using AI if you're in business. They have started without you. They are using it on their phone, and they are clipping and pasting your data into their phone and then putting it back into your systems after they've run it through AI. Your technology teams may or may not be doing this, but your coders are probably leaning into this right now as well. Your customers are also probably doing this. So it's very important to understand as a company how you do this. I started with this, but start small, test, gain confidence in your controls with small use cases, and make sure you understand your data flows is super important. All existing applicable security controls and risk mitigation should be in place, and you should specifically pen test your models and apps for AI. And you should be doing that for all things, but it's very important to do it with your AI models because these are so new that it is very much something that can surprise you and create a very large exposure. Understand how your vendors are using AI. So 9 times out of 10, you'll buy a tool, you didn't know that in the back end, your tool is being processed by AI. So unless you ask, you may be using AI and you don't know it as a small or medium business or even as a larger business. So just suggest that people go through that process. Next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how do you take next steps? These are focused on business, so I'm going to kind of skip through these very quickly, and I'm going to get down to one of the next slides, which is really focused on more what can students do. So from a business perspective, build a security team or center of excellence, hire people that have expertise so that you can begin to build your AI expertise. Check for accuracy and validate it. Put a human in the loop somewhere to validate that the AI is producing results that are both useful and non-toxic and ethical before you expose it to your customers. Don't let your customer be the first point of contact with that kind of data. And then last but not least, safety. Protect your business and protect your customers by ensuring you're handling your PII correctly. You're doing all of the right things from a privacy perspective and explainability perspective, because the last thing you want to do is be standing in front of a judge trying to explain an AI model that you didn't understand yourself. That will never go well. And then the next slide, there are a couple more really about honesty and ethics, and then empowerment, right? And then last but not least, I really like this one because it is something that a lot of people hadn't thought about, which is we're pulling a lot of data and electricity. Sustainability is a challenge with AI the way we're doing it today. We are pulling a lot of electricity. We are really not doing the right thing for the planet by building data center over data center over data center and sucking down all that power and producing all that heat just to do AI models. So we will have to tie sustainability into this at some point. That is an area that is beginning to emerge into the AI ecosystem right now. But what I really wanted to touch on, if we can go to the next slide, please, is for students, what are the types of things that I would recommend you can do? So first, get into it, right? Learn AI and be part of it. Every technology that we are using in the future will probably in some element use a machine learning or AI model or an LLM model as part of its implementation. So get comfortable with it. You don't have to know the details, the deep technology details, but definitely get comfortable with it because this is going to be a thing throughout all of technology, probably for the rest of technology until something better replaces it. Also, consider new skills like prompt engineering to supplement your existing skills that you might be going with coding or data science. There are absolutely new career fields that are coming and emerging out of the AI space, and they'll come with a new set of skills. So keep up with those and ensure that you're kind of keeping up with that, because that'll be healthy for you as a person in technology, because this is such a ubiquitous thing. Think of AI as an accelerant to getting work done and not a replacement for your job, right? Don't let that lead your feeling around AI. Proper use of AI, generally speaking, is cited as giving about a 30% improvement in overall productivity. And because of that, those that are using AI are going to be more productive, and therefore they are going to outstrip those that are not using AI if those numbers stay true. And so getting used to AI as sort of your sidecar that you work with, if you will, where you can work with it safely, that is something that I would suggest doing. It is very helpful, and it takes a little bit of practice, but once you're in it, it's fairly easy to keep going. Stay current and keep learning. That's usually a good lesson for all things, but with AI, this is moving fast. It is a nascent field, and there is a lot of energy being put into it because they believe there's a pot of gold at the end of this, which there probably is. Therefore, things are changing fast. Technology is exploding, and they're using AI to study AI and produce more results faster even. So it is really becoming something that it's really about just keeping that constant learning mindset. Thinking outside of the box. How can AI be used to, sorry, there's a typo in the slide, but improve coding security and efficiency? We're still figuring out how we can apply AI to some things. I think new eyes give us new viewpoints, and that's actually a great place for students to come in and say, hey, I thought this might be a good idea. Cool, let's go try that out. That may well bear fruit, and that's the kind of thinking that we need to make sure that we're adapting to this new technology quickly. And then the last thing, think about other emerging technologies. Think about the synergies that you might get between these technologies. As an example that I threw on here, what happens when quantum and AI come together? Maybe nothing, maybe something, I don't know, but I know those are two hot and emerging technologies right now. Those would be interesting fields to consider as things move forward. So with that, I'm done on the AI side of things, but before we're done, I did want to throw this slide up and then I will open it up for questions. This is not a Salesforce deck per se, but I did want to mention for those that might find it handy, Salesforce does have a job site and an internship site, and they have a couple of programs called the ADA Developer Academy and the Year Up internships, where they sponsor various degrees of technology internships or training programs. Those graphics in this slide are links to the website that contain all of this information about those programs, including schedules and various application windows and so forth. So if you are interested in an internship program or a career at Salesforce, feel free to save these links. Feel free to go to those links and ask questions. If you are in a place where something looks interesting sooner rather than later, my LinkedIn is also later in the deck. And if you hit me on LinkedIn and say that you're a participant in this program and you're interested in something, I will see what I can do to help. I will make no assurances that I can get you any job or internship, but I certainly will give it a run to give help where help is requested. So with that, I would like to just say thank you for the opportunity to present. I really appreciate these kinds of opportunities because I often talk to the old and leaving the career path folks, so it's great to see a bunch of young folks who are coming into the careers. And so with that, the only advice I would say here is jump in. It's a great opportunity, and do not be left behind. Like this is really a good opportunity. So with that, Morgan, I don't know how you normally would like to do questions, if it's hand raising or if you have people submit, but I'll open it up for questions as we have time left.
I would tell people to raise their hand or open their mic and start asking questions. And to give people the courage to do this, I was at an NSA conference back in April, and I have the information on what percentage of the jobs in cybersecurity are going to use AI, how much of the AI will replace some of their tasks. And the comment we came away with was, AI will not replace your job. People who know how to use AI will keep their jobs.
I'm very much aligned with that, because I look at this and think, if you think about IT and where it is in its sort of growth cycle, we are still largely in the infancy of IT, right? We're pre-industrial revolution, if you will. And if you compare to where we were pre the actual industrial revolution, there were a few precursors that really helped accelerate and turn the industrial revolution on to make it what it was. Standardization, which we're starting to see through open source libraries and so forth, and use of tools like AI that allowed people to focus on what people are good at and let machines do what machines are good at. So sticking with that model, that is how I view AI in the IT space. Machines are really good at crawling big data sets and finding small patterns. We as people are not. So let's let the machines do the work that they're really good at, and that leaves us to do the work like judgment calls, incomplete data, assessments, future-looking things that might not be statistical-based, but more instinct-based. Those kinds of things people are very good at and machines are terrible at. So combining those two things now puts a strength with a weakness and a weakness with a strength, and you get a great balance, in my opinion.
Okay, what questions do people have? And I think it's easier if you just talk than chat. let's see what's in the chat.
I was going to say I didn't open the chat, but I will just now.
Okay, let's open the chats.
I see a hand up. Mateo, please.
Oh,
Mateo,
let's go ahead.
okay.
And I think Ank is the first one who ended up.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So I was wondering. So today I was just watching like talk by Andrew Ng on one of the conferences, and he was mentioning something I had a question on, which was how the companies are using the AI technologies responsibly. Was something that I was wondering, because it's been more like, you know, you build something and you break, and then because you're trying to move fast. So I'm wondering what are some of the big known private sectors using or doing, implementing that are more responsible? That's my question. Thank
Sure.
you.
Absolutely. So I can't speak for everybody, so I will kind of couch this into two buckets. There is a significant pressure to produce AI for the financial results, and there are companies out there that will act ethically, and there are ones that will act unethically to reach that result. And that's generally true about all technologies, and I don't want to sugarcoat that, because that is how it works. The ethics around AI are going to come from the people, not from the technology. So the idea here is the companies that are out there, and I'm specifically happy with the way Salesforce has approached this. We took a very strong stance early on ethical use, and we set up an ethics oversight board within the company to ensure all the uses of AI meet our company's view of what ethical standards should be, as well as going out to the regulatory environment and studying what the European Union, China, United States, what they're all saying about the ethical use of AI. And we were sort of using and sort of aligning all of those things. Our standard actually was at or above. So for our case, we were doing that ethically. The question is, are all companies doing that? Most big companies will, because the downside of doing it wrong can be very critical if you get caught. But the question is, ethics are always sort of in that gray space of, you know, there's a, I thought this was right until somebody told me it was wrong kind of moment. So I would say it's a great question. I wish I had a better answer than most companies are doing it well. And until regulatory guidance is out that will standardize that, I think you'll see it sort of as a stereo equalizer of different companies acting in different ways because they're going after different objectives. That being said, all of the ones that I know of, all of the big players do have ethics bodies within the company that are working with their AI teams to make sure that they're doing it within those boundaries. Did that help, and did that answer your question? Thank you. I don't see a queue, okay. But I do. Oh, go ahead.
I just say like it will draw. You can just start your question.
What was that, Tina?
Can I have a, okay. Can I have a question now, or is somebody already raised it?
No, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Brian, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Here now, when I went to the UTech Northwest, okay, then even before summer, then whenever people came to the UTech Northwest, they want to encourage them to introduce jobs, okay? Then, unfortunately, I saw the 80%, hey, I got the layoff in the full stack. And then some of them also, they are looking for data scientist AI. There's only one, not many. So CDU now, we are infuse AIs into all of our courses. For example, one of our full stack development, now we want to use the kind of the API, through the API calling to the machine learning algorithm, and also talking to the large language model. And then we are practicing that. So that's the new term IBM defined AI engineer. So in terms of your experience, currently our new computer scientist or software engineer, so how they can be equipped to prepare for their job market that has a demand?
Sure. No, absolutely. It's a great question. We will always need people that know and need to know how to code. And there's one reason, and for that, because AI is pretty good at it as it evolves, but there's one reason for that. And that goes back to hallucinations and human in the loop verification. We do need people who can still do this job so that they can read the code and make sure that it's being written correctly and so forth. Will that eventually be untrue? I don't know, in theory, you could say yes, but I actually believe there will always be some variant of that. However, I really like the way you pose that, which is this doesn't mean that software engineers become obsolete, because software engineers don't just write code. Software engineers do a number of other tasks that are very important, right? And so ensuring that the code is safe and stable and secure and all of these things, having oversight to that, designing the system, right? All of those things are things that you need to have an understanding of how the system works, but then you abstract it up, you make your design, and then you may not have to write a line of code, but if you could submit a diagram to a UI, and the UI would then put it to AI, and it would write the shell code for that, and it would say, hey, is this what you're looking for? That might be something that would accelerate the software development, but would also still utilize the skill sets that you need as a human to design the thing that you want, to make something, because creativity is still not something that AI has demonstrated. And almost all of the things that we see successful out there started with somebody saying, I have a better way to do something or have something creative. So I feel like that human creativity is going to continue to be key. But to your point, the skill set's going to shift away from writing code. As an example, we have a lot of old 20-year-old code at Salesforce that was still running. And so we're having to go through a lot of tech debt removal. Nobody wants to go back and work on the old stuff. They all want to go work on the new stuff. So we're looking at taking AI and saying, hey, can you take and refresh all of this old code into new languages and new techniques and do that? So we're not hiring people to do that. Most of the people didn't want to do that work anyway. It's kind of boring. What they want to do is go work on the AI systems and the large language models. So that's how we're seeing our jobs shift internally. But I agree with you completely that having AI skill set in the curriculum is the way of the future, because it will absolutely be part of this. And to the point I made earlier, like if I can code something 30% faster than the person next to me because I'm leveraging AI, I am going to be more successful as a software engineer. I hadn't heard the term AI engineer. I like that, though. I think that's a great thing. And I do also believe that there will be even new jobs, like prompt engineering was one I brought up earlier, but people who have specific prompt engineering skills and specific skills like that, that will be necessary as we evolve through.
Yes, because of prompt engineering, so we want to infuse that one into our system. Currently, we have the course then using retrieval augmented generation. That's we are training master level. Then we can, if that works, then next year we push it down to the undergraduate level. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And I think that's awesome, because that is absolutely the type of skill set that I know that we and others in the industry are looking for. So that's fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Sam asked my question. In fact, one of the things, Brian, and I've mentioned this to you, people keep thinking of more questions, is having you join our advisory board, because this is the type of information that we need from industry to keep our courses relevant. And from a now that's from the coding perspective. For people that are doing either data science, cybersecurity, what would you be recommending to them in terms of the AI tools that they need?
So it's a great question. I will say, I'll start in my wheelhouse, which is security, and say the security, the foot race in security that we traditionally fight is the bad guys are faster than we are, and they only have to be right once, and we have to be right every time, right? That's kind of the foot race. The weaponization of one vulnerability can kill us. And I remember the day when I was talking about Windows NT back in the wild west days, but somebody said, well, the only thing that can't hurt you is a printer. Nobody can exploit a printer. So of course, 6 months later, somebody figured out how to blow up printer drivers, and suddenly that wasn't true anymore. That's the foot race. So how does AI help us? AI will allow us to do extremely good vulnerability detection and management, because it can do that grind of just go test through all the different scenarios. It can do those things. I think it has that capability. It has the capability of providing us with a viewpoint that don't get me wrong, the bad guys are using AI just like we are. They are doing these things. So being able to use AI as a tool of defense will speed up our response time and close down the amount of really important things we have to do. Because if the more things we have to do, the less of them we accomplish. And so what's happening is we can focus in on the truly important things and then turn loose once we go from somebody figured something out to I have a defense. Once I have a defense, I can turn it over to an AI system to begin to deploy and put that out while I'm fighting the next fight, instead of having my people focused on the deployment and the instantiation of that as well. So I think those are things. In addition to that, simple data analytics and indicators of compromise, figuring out what the bad guys do. Boy, machine learning is much better at that than people. It takes a long time to train a truly good threat hunter. An AI system, you can train up on that, and it will get trained and stay trained and won't leave for another company. So you now have a defense that is actually staying there, because threat hunting is extremely hard to get good quality talent, and it's super valuable once you have it. So those are sort of a couple of top of the mind areas from the overall security side. From the data side, not my wheelhouse, but what I will say is there's a couple of things about data that are always have been true. And if they change, it could really change the sort of the landscape of the environment. Data is, once you have it, you have it, but it's hard to move. Moving a petabyte of data is still hard. Moving 100 petabytes or of data is extremely hard. In fact, we found ourselves finding it was faster to take the disk out of the system, put it in a FedEx box, and mail it than it was to try to move the data across the wire. So data management and figuring how to get data in the right place at the right time at speed is something that I think is a challenge for the next data science. In addition to that, how you break down data and all the metadata management that you use as you're moving it around your systems and knowing it so you can stay compliant and still stay useful. Those are actually skill sets that I feel are very important right now. Some people are very good at it. Some people are less good at it. I think that's just going to continue to be a massive importance overall to the organizations that use it. And all organizations are either going to buy, rent, or create their own data, because that's the gold right now, right? That's what feeds the AI engines.
So I noticed there were 2 hands up. I still see Eduardo's hand up, and I don't know if we still have Ian here. So Eduardo, do you want to ask your question?
Of course, ma'am. Well, I was wondering a bit more about, because you mentioned before that the AI can take a lot of data from everywhere. So I was wondering, what if this artificial intelligence can, for example, take the data of a social media account and, based on the interactions that 100 different social media accounts can utilize, kind of replicate it in the internet in order to appear as a human and be really hard to distinguish between one artificial intelligence and one real human. I was wondering about that.
Sure. So I'll go back to yes is, I think, the short answer to yes, that could be done, or at least I think people are attempting to do that. The good news, bad news about that is in some cases it will be hard to detect simply because most people don't try, right? They interact with social media accounts, but if you think there's something wrong and you really want to find out, is this a bot? There are probably ways you can figure it out, because sooner or later the bots will do or say something that's a little odd, and you kind of think, huh, weird, and they'll develop a pattern, right? Truth to be told, I think that is probably an area that when I talked about like disinformation and using social media accounts to produce varying degrees of social movement or social restriction, that absolutely is an area where I see AI and AI bot farms becoming a thing. They will produce a series of accounts, they'll amplify themselves, they'll make it sound like everybody's talking about it, but everybody in this case might be 10,000 bots in one person. And that's not really the same effect, right? It's not what they're trying. In addition to that, they're leveraging the social media's function, which is to amplify things that you like so that you get more likes, right? That amplification of attention is actually easy for AI to accentuate, and also to come at you with a different angle on it, which is I can use that to accentuate a message you don't want to see, because I can find a way to subtly get you to click on something, and then I can slowly move that message to the thing you wouldn't have clicked on, but now I got you there because I did that over time. I think it is going to happen, And I think it is up to both the social media companies to really, which they already have varying degrees of bot control. But I think that needs to get much more rigorous. In fact, in my opinion, I'm not a huge make everything into a law, but this is a case where I do feel there's probably some regulation that's going to be necessary just to make sure that everybody's got a level playing field, because it's just hard to detect as the end user, at least.
Thank you. Ian, you also have a question.
Yes. Hi, Brian. Thank you for your time and thank you for your service. I work in IT today at a larger company, and when I'm talking to people around me about AI adoption in general, it's not what I support directly, but it is bubbling up through the cracks around all of us. I'm still encountering people who are, maybe because they don't understand its capabilities and what it can do, a little bit skeptical. But I've actually encountered a few people in the security space that haven't that seem resistant to it, to incorporating it into enterprise operations. I'm curious if, from your perspective, in general, the security field is sold on needing to use AI as a security solution. How do you overcome naysayers when you have are there any professionals that still don't think it's a good idea to adopt this?
So that's a great question. And there's sort of, I think, three camps that security breaks into fairly quickly. The vendors, who see AI as a way to be a feature differentiator. So they're all adopting AI ML because they want to use it as a sales tool. Now, the degree to which they actually use it, or that it's actually AI and ML, you can poke at and say some yes, some no, some are just using advanced algorithms, et cetera. But that space is fairly clean on the I want to adopt because it will sell more stuff. And then there's internally two camps. There's the people that have the boring, mundane job that they really wish they could automate their way out of, like the SOC analyst, right? Or those folks. They really are like, look, I look at a pane of glass all day and I'm looking for one crazy thing out of 10 million. Boy, wouldn't a machine be good at this? So they want to do it. But then there's also the folks that tend to be, and I'll put myself in this bucket, it's kind of the old graybeards of security that are still thinking about, firewalls on the outside and, like at the edge. And you're like, well, that's all degenerated over the many years. There's really no true edge anymore. Why are we still thinking that way? But there are some of those that still think that way. So I do think that there is a hesitance in security. We tend to be a conservative field, and there is a hesitance sometimes to take on a new technology. I'll tell you why when I have that hesitance, why it comes from, because usually I jumped in too far too fast and I blew something up. Because the other thing is security is usually a privileged operation that has the ability to do both good and bad. And if you do it poorly, you can find yourself at a place where you're cleaning up your own mess. So I do feel like there's a lot of conservatism around that space, because once you use it and put it out there, if it's the thing that blows up the company, then everybody's like, oh, see, security is not all that good. And you've gone through that cycle once or twice. So how do you beat that, right? I think that goes back to some of the things I was talking about a little earlier. It's like, find a use case, make it small, and prove the value on a small use case where you don't bet the farm on the one time you use it, but rather just start accentuating something small enough that you can get it going, but big enough it makes some difference. And if you can find that sweet spot, then you can come in and say, look, I did this. Now, if I open it up a little more, I think I can get this much further. That takes them down that trail of, okay, now it's not evil and bad, and it is proven because you've done it. It's not theory. I've seen it in practice, and that starts to open up those gates. I will say there's one other method that our organization used, which is our CEO came in and said, we're doing AI. The answer will never be no. And so there were people in our security organization that was like, man, that guy's crazy. He's blowing up our company. But the answer was, our CEO can't accept that risk. That is his job. And he said, we're doing it. So therefore we jumped on board and we learned how to do it while we were building it. I will say, I think every company that is in the lead is legitimately in that space where they're all quasi nervous that they got it right. So that's still an emerging place. But that's kind of how I look at it, because I do feel that there's going to be pressure to get out of, like, the most expensive asset in your IT inventory is going to be your people, right? So at the end of the day, we want to maximize the value of the people that you have. And if you've got a bunch of people who are bored looking at screens, and you can replace them with robots that will alert you on things. That's a massive value. And there are companies that are vendors out there doing it, and there are internal companies that are doing that. But that is a place where I see a lot of value coming into the IT field. And like I said, threat hunting is another one where I see, like, if you're the people that can find all the things at the same time that the bad guy is, or faster, you are winning the race. You are going to be successful. And those are things that are going to really make it work. There's still a lot of people that are going to tell you, I don't trust it until 18 other people have done it, right? But those also are the people, like I said, those 18 other people that are doing it, they're going to get out ahead in the market, and that's going to be something that the business side, I think, is going to drive, and security is going to have to ride along. Our team legitimately came in, and when the security team started kind of grumbling about this, we call him a chief trust officer versus a chief security officer, but what he came in and said was essentially, if you don't like this so much that you're going to be a problem, you should leave the company, because we are doing this. I want you here, but you cannot poison the well. We're going to do this. We have to do this right. So let's go do it. Right. And so everybody was kind of like, oh, okay, let's get on it. Right. So we passed over that, but there was a bit of a cultural thing there. And I appreciate the question, because that is one of the harder things sometimes for security teams to kind of like do it differently and new.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. I think we're coming to the end. Kina, you're the timekeeper here.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I think I will let Morgan to end everything.
I get to end
go
everything.
ahead, Morgan.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Brian, I want to thank you for this information. I'm going to remind people that you are responsive on LinkedIn, because I don't know about other folks, but I always think of 5 questions after I get out of a meeting. So I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you in February and talking about how we can move forward on a number of different initiatives. Thank you.
That would be great.
Very much.
I very much appreciate it. Thank you all for listening and paying attention to me. Sometimes I feel like I did a lot of talking, and I hope it was useful. I'm not kidding. Truthfully, if you do have questions, or if you feel like you wanted to reach out about an internship or something and you found something that you're looking for, hit me up. I may be a day or two, depending on my volume of requests, but I try to get back to everybody that hits me on LinkedIn. Just let me know that you were at the City U talk, so that I prioritize you higher than the vendors and everybody else that tries to hit me on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much.
Very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity.
We appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.